a local repo. We have been working on a project. We've been tracking our changes in our local Git repository, but we're now at the point where we're ready to host that repository on a remote service such as GitHub. And what I've diagrammed here is my local repository. On the master branch, all check-ins are up to date, and my branch name is noted here, as well as my terminal over here. And so I'll be running some commands from my terminal from the my proj directory, which we see represented right over here. Also, note that my directory has a hidden .git directory, which is sort of what defines it as a repository, because this is where all of our Git data will live. This is important, just generally speaking, but also for this particular example. And so over here, we have my own personal GitHub account represented as this remote service. And I have set up a repo in that GitHub account to be ready to, be the remote host for my local repository, my project right over here. So my proj is up there, and once I have done that, part of setting up a remote repository on something like GitHub is you're given a address that will allow you to connect to that remote repository from your local machine. An HTTP URL or an SSH URL. Those are the two methods you can connect with. And in this example, we'll be using an HTTP URL for us to get that connection. And so that is what is represented here. So we'll walk through the steps of setting up a new remote repository, complete with sort of a conceptual idea of what's happening to go along with the commands you'll be issuing to accomplish this. So, first command we're going to run is to tell our Git repo here in our local machine that it is going to have a remote access point. Okay, that we're just going to tell it that here is a remote access point, and here's what we want to call it. The command is git remote. So I will say git remote and then add. So git remote add, I'm going to add a remote repo, and I give this remote repo a name. You will commonly see the word origin used to refer to a remote repo, but this is just a code name. Origin is just the name most people give the remote repo for their projects. So origin is the name of this remote repo, and finally we must give the address for this remote repository, the one that we were issued by GitHub over here. Now this is going to be a long string. Here I'll just, in pencil, I'll note what it would look like. You would see HTTP github.com. So it's hosted on a GitHub server. Then you'll see your GitHub username and GitHub repository name, so my proj. And then you will see something like myproj.git. Oh, I'm well off the screen, but it is, a standardized set of a URL path to your remote repository. So rather than write this over and over again, I'm just going to give this sort of a pseudocode name to be known as myproj.git. So this will tell our local repository where origin will live. Now I want to make sure that this is like kind of going to be conceptually explained in this whole process. So here, this is what it would look like. We now have a reference to this remote repo by way of origin. So we have this basically a pointer to that repository over here. Now I can refer to origin and I will be able to access that repo, okay? So the next command I'm going to issue is a push command to say I want to push the state of this repository into this one, essentially taking the master branch and plugging it into that repository. So that would then receive that master branch plus all of the other branches that might exist from within this local Git repo, plus all the commits that have occurred. That will all be preserved by way of your Git data. So this is what that command would look like. Git push origin master. So you're saying origin is where I'm going, and master is what I'm going to put there. I'm going to put my master branch up here to origin. So this is kind of look like this. After that occurs, data gets sent. And after this command is issued, you should be able to go into your GitHub account and see those files represented after this command is run. So at this point, I have basically backed up my project. All of my files are now preserved in a local storage area. And at this point, anyone can clone this remote repository into their local directories, thus having their own local repository for this shared project. So the next thing we'll be seeing is how to clone and work with an existing remote repo that we will then have access to.